I've been using the iPhone Air for a week now, and yeah, I'm sending this back. Let me explain why. I watched this year's iPhone event with a mixture of disbelief and awe as Apple unveiled their first completely new iPhone design in 6 years. Super thin, framed in titanium and packing their latest A19 Pro chip, this seemed to offer a very interesting midpoint between the base level iPhone and their super powerful Pro models. And then I thought about it for a while and realized Apple just spent billions solving a problem that no one asked them to solve. They've launched this impossibly thin iPhone with the worst battery in the entire lineup, even when over 90% of their customers actually say battery life is their top priority. So with the iPhone Air, are Apple just showing off, or has this really got a dedicated audience? Well, this video will give you a rundown of all the trade-offs that you'll need to be okay with if you want to own one of these. I'll show you how it actually performs in daily life compared to my previous iPhone Pro Max, and if you're on the fence, I'll run through who I think should buy one. Let's get into it. First of all, it has been a while since I unboxed a new iPhone, but it has to be said, opening up and holding the iPhone Air for the first time is quite the experience. It's definitely thin. I wouldn't quite say it's impossibly thin, but it is quite something to hold. In fact, it's exactly as thin as the latest batch of iPad Pros, and say what you like about this, it's undoubtedly a marvel of engineering, and if you didn't quite catch the keynote, they basically made the whole device a battery. All the other components are squished into this top part where the camera bump sits. And do you know what? I had the exact same two thoughts holding this as I did when I first held that iPad Pro. The first one was, holy shit, I'm definitely going to break this. And the second one was, I need to put a case on this thing immediately. So I did. I put on a case and I was instantly disappointed because whilst this was still super light, with a case, it just wasn't as thin. In fact, it felt much more like a regular iPhone. And that is a problem because unless you're the sort of maniac that will put $1,000 or pound device in your pocket or bag without any protection, you're always going to be getting a slightly different experience of holding it than Apple intended. Something I will say about the feel, and I know I'm stressing this point, but I will say at least 90% of the reason to buy this thing is how it feels in your hand, is that it feels surprisingly solid for such a thin device. Now, part of that is the aluminium frame, which is beautifully polished and surprisingly grippy, but also the ceramic shield back, which you'll be pleased to hear is also very easy to hold and not at all slippery. It kind of feels like Apple's starting point in designing this was, well, what if we just make a piece of jewelry? It's almost like it was designed to be presented as a fashion item first, even if that means a whole host of compromises. And again, that's also a problem because I don't want a piece of jewelry. I want a good phone that is a powerful multi-purpose tool first. And yeah, if it happens to look lovely as well, that's a bonus. Just in case you're wondering how much this thing weighs, it is just 123 grams without a case, and that's about as much as a deck of playing cards, a couple of AA batteries, or an actual Apple. Now, we should probably talk about power, and although Apple say the iPhone Air will give you all-day battery life, in my testing I found nothing like that when using the Air all day. It's more like 7 hours. In the first week, it's been getting to 6 to 7 p.m. on pretty much average usage, and I'm already running down to single figures up in the top right of the screen. Not great for £1,000 or dollar spend. This is brand new and it's the best the battery is ever going to be. If you were to ask Apple, they would rather you spend another 100 quid on this slim battery bank to help you get to the end of the day without ever plugging in. And trust me when I say, I will never ever recommend buying that. This, on the other hand, this is UGREEN's latest MagFlow wireless power bank, and it'll serve up 10,000 milliamp hours. Apple's iPhone Air battery bank, yeah, just 3,000 milliamp hours. That's like comparing a full pint to a tiny shot of juice. The UGREEN MagFlow charger provides up to 30 watt fast charging with a built-in cable, as well as 25 watt wireless via Qi 2 compatibility, which is 50% faster than regular MagSafe. And you can even charge a laptop using the built-in cable, which doubles up as a strap. Apple's new slim charger, on the other hand, only manages up to 12 watts. If it's feeling like it. So unless you really love paying extra for less, there's an obvious winner here. You can grab the UGREEN MagFlow wireless Qi 2 charger at the link in the description, and thanks again to UGREEN for sponsoring this one. Let's take a look at how the iPhone Air performs in daily life. Well, the good news is that the screen is great. It's a full-blown 120Hz ProMotion display that goes all the way up to 3000 nits of peak brightness in outdoor settings. That's a whole 1000 nits higher than my current 15 Pro Max, and yeah, this was really noticeable in everyday outdoor usage. And the new A19 Pro chip zips along absolutely fine. I was able to do all my everyday stuff like checking social media, sending emails and messages, and also using Apple Pay for payments without any trouble at all. Even things like editing images, this thing handles with ease. Now, camera-wise, the selfie camera gets a big bump to this big square sensor that can capture lots more information, and even if you're holding it in portrait orientation, it intelligently switches to landscape when you have more than a few people in the frame. It's a really clever idea, but it would be great to have this work via a command rather than using an algorithm to decide when to switch to landscape, because sometimes you haven't always got friends to take pictures with. In fact, I did update the software and found there is a control in the camera app that lets you switch from portrait to landscape manually. So yeah, here it is. And that brings us to the rear-facing camera, the 48 megapixel Fusion camera system. Now, this was the part I was really interested to test because while I don't really see myself as a pro user in terms of video, I do take a lot of photos with my iPhone 15 Pro Max. And my current Pro Max model has 3 different lenses to cover lots of different uses. It's a bit like a band. I've got a bass player, a drum kit, and a lead guitar. Each instrument does its job, and it does them really well. As for the iPhone Air, well, that's a bit like a singer alone on a stage. But they do have a microphone that's got auto-tune built in and plenty of effects so that one voice can sound like many. Let me show you what I mean. So a standard wide shot like this looks pretty similar from both phones, but if I go for a super wide shot here on my iPhone 15 Pro Max, yeah, the Air just can't do this. I've had to step back to get more in the frame, and even then I don't get that crazy ultra wide feel. Likewise, if I want to zoom in on some details, the telephoto lens on my 15 Pro Max gives me tons of stability and detail. The Air will try, but after a point it's just a digital crop, so the image is going to be full of noise. Doesn't look great. Then there's also close-ups using the built-in macro mode on the Pro model. It just knows when to switch over to macro mode, but the Air doing the same thing just doesn't do such a great job. The same is true of nighttime photos, where the lack of a LiDAR sensor on the Air means that when you're in dark environments or just straight up taking photos at nighttime, the iPhone Air is really gonna struggle. Now here's a nighttime shot from the Air paired with one on my 15 Pro Max. Even with the street lamps providing some light, the Air just doesn't do a great job here compared to my 2-year-old Pro Max model. Now, I don't actually have an iPhone 17 Pro model yet to compare this against, but I'm willing to bet that if you're on the classic 2-year upgrade cycle, you're probably on an iPhone 15 or a 15 Pro like me and wondering if this is going to be better for you. Well, in a few ways, yes, and in many ways, no. Let's start with the good stuff. As I've already touched on, the weight difference is pretty sizable, and everyone I've shown this to instantly comments on how incredibly light it is. And that really matters if you're the kind of person who only carries their phone around in their pocket, or even in their hand, or maybe on one of those fancy lanyards. It's so light, you almost don't know it's there. Secondly, the screen is lovely, and as you can see, it's almost the same size as my 15 Pro Max, but it's actually quite a bit brighter. If you're mainly using your phone in daylight or outdoors, that might make a big difference to you. Finally, that new selfie camera is just better. It's not a software feature either. The Air gets that brand new square sensor that arrives in all this year's iPhone models and takes great photos and video with ease. Oh yeah, and you get the camera control button, which Apple like so much they didn't mention at all in their keynote. Ditto visual intelligence, which I've used all of 0 times. So those would be my top reasons to buy this if you're upgrading from an iPhone 15 or 15 Pro. As for reasons not to, well, there's battery life, which we've already talked about. You're just not going to get a full day of use out of this without charging it at some point. And if you're mainly sat at a desk near a charge point most of the day, that might be fine for you, but compared to my 2-year-old 15 Pro Max, which still gets me to the end of the day without being charged or babied, that's not something I'm prepared to compromise on. There's also the speakers. Now, granted, I almost always listen to music via AirPods or other headphones, but there is a challenge in this because the speakers just aren't that great, especially at the low end. Have a listen to this. There's also the Fusion camera system, which despite being clever, just cannot take on the Pro phones, or even really the regular iPhone 17 with that double lens setup. Honestly, if you've got £1,000 to spend, just buy a used iPhone 16 or a 15 Pro or the latest iPhone 17 and you'll probably feel loads better about your investment. In the interest of balance, if you're using an older phone, maybe an 11, 12, 13 or 14 even, this is going to feel like a pretty big step up in terms of speed and power. Maybe you're on one of the mini phones, in which case this will also feel great on pretty much all counts, including battery life. Okay, so why am I really sending this back then? Well, after a week of testing, I think I get what Apple are trying to do here. In my eyes, this is a Pro phone for people who have Pro money but don't really need Pro features or Pro battery life. The ideal customer for this is going to be happy taking regular photos and using this gorgeous screen and isn't ever too far away from a charging point and will probably want their friends to know they have the lightest, thinnest bit of iPhone action on the market. You probably know the type, and after trying this for a week, Apple have convinced me that I'm just not that kind of iPhone customer. I miss the battery life of my 2-year-old 15 Pro Max, I've missed the extra camera power, and weirdly, I miss how solid that one feels in my hands. I guess compromises go both ways. How about you folks? If you've also got your hands on an iPhone Air, who do you think this is for? And if not, hopefully this has helped you decide whether or not to buy one. Let me know in the comments. And it looks like I'm going to be getting myself a 17 Pro to try out next day. I might just wait to see if Apple are going to resolve that issue with them scratching faster than a cat on a brand new sofa. While you're waiting for me to make that video, in the meantime, the YouTube gods think you're going to love this one over here. See you next time, folks.